The wreck drifted in the dark between stars. Cold metal floated without a sound. The hull was broken open like a wound, and jagged edges reached out into the emptiness. The ship had been Cathari, once proud and deadly, but now it was nothing more than a tomb. Commander Rains stood at the viewing port of the defender frigate Valor's Edge. His jaw was set tight, and his eyes fixed on the ruined vessel ahead. Around him, the crew worked in silence, as if afraid to speak too loud in the shadow of the wreck. Rains raised one gloved hand and pointed forward. "Bring us closer," he ordered. The Valor's Edge engines hummed low, pushing the frigate nearer to the derelict ship. Its broken body spun slowly in the void, as if it were unwilling to let go of the fight it once carried. No lights burned inside, no signs of life showed on sensors, only the distress beacon pulsing again and again through the black. Lieutenant Hale leaned over his console, studying the signal. "It should not be." "Broadcasting, sir," he said. "The ship has been dead for decades," Rains frowned. "Then why is it calling us now?" The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. None of the crew answered because none of them could. The beacon should have gone, silent years ago, yet here it was, screaming into the void, like a voice that refused to be forgotten. The boarding team prepared quickly, rifles checked, armor sealed, helmets locked. The silence of space filled their suits as they crossed the narrow bridge between living ship and dead one. Magnetic boots clamped against torn metal, and each step echoed through their helmets like a drumbeat. Inside the wreck, the air was gone long ago. The walls were scorched and pitted from weapons fire panels, hung loose like broken bones. Every corridor whispered of violence and sudden death. The humans moved, slow beams of light cutting through dust that had not been disturbed in years. Then Sergeant Vega's voice came over comms. "Contact ahead." The team froze, weapons raised, lights snapped forward, shapes filled the corridor bodies. Cathari soldiers in full battle armor slumped against the walls and floor, their skeletal forms preserved by the vacuum. They had died fighting to the last moment. But that was not what froze the blood of the human defenders. The helmets of the dead were cracked open, and inside the jaws of their alien skulls, something unnatural glowed faintly. Blue sparks flickered like tiny embers, and a low hum filled the corridor. One of the bodies twitched. Its head jerked as if waking from a nightmare, and then, in a voice raw and broken, came words no one expected. "Rains." The commander staggered back, his name spoken in human tongue from the throat of a dead enemy. The team's weapons remained trained, but none fired. They only listened as the corpse continued in a whisper, "We remember." Then silence again. The glow faded, the body went still. The team stood frozen, not daring to breathe. Every instinct screamed at them to run, but duty chained their boots to the deck. Sergeant Vega finally broke the silence. "Sir, that thing just said your name." Rains steadied himself, forcing steel into his voice. "It is impossible," he said. "They should not even know our language, let alone my name." Yet the truth had echoed in his ears. The dead alien had spoken like a man, and it had known who he was. The team pressed deeper into the wreck. Every corner revealed more dead, Cathari soldiers. Some sat upright as if still at their posts. Some clutched weapons that would never fire again, and more than once faint sparks lit inside their skulls, and voices whispered words in human speech, names of soldiers long dead, cries of battles fought decades. "Ego, please for help," in accents no alien throat should carry. Rains recorded each moment. His chest tightened with every name spoken. He recognized them, men and women he had served with, friends lost in the war. Yet their voices now spilled from the lips of enemies long fallen. The team reached the central chamber. Here the wreck told its full story. The Cathari had gathered in a last stand. Bodies circled around a central console now shattered. Blood and scorch marks painted the walls. And in The center floated a single object untouched by time, a black cube pulsing with faint light. "Sir, we are picking up energy readings." Hale reported from the frigate. "That thing is alive somehow." Rains approached slowly, every step heavy with dread. The cube rotated gently in the air as if it waited for him. When he reached out, his gauntlet touched the surface, and at once the chamber filled with sound. A chorus of voices exploded in his mind. Not alien voices, not unknown tongues, but human. Thousands of them layered over each other, screaming, crying, shouting names, orders, prayers. The sound crashed into him like a storm, and he staggered back, clutching his helmet. The cube pulsed brighter, and through the chaos, a single phrase rose above. "The noise, the enemy remembers." The words burned into his skull. The walls seemed to close in. The bodies of the Cathari twitched as if alive again, their heads jerking to look toward him. Blue sparks filled their eyes, and one by one they began to speak in unison. "The enemy remembers," over and over. The chant grew louder, filling the chamber until it shook with power. The human team backed toward the exit rifles raised, yet fear holding their trigger fingers still. This was no ordinary enemy, no ordinary wreck. Something older and darker had rooted itself here. Rains gave the order, "Retrieve the cube and fall back now." The team obeyed with haste. Sergeant Vega secured the device in a containment field. The voices screamed louder, as if resisting, but the field held. The defenders rushed back through the corridors, past the dead who twitched and whispered as they passed. Back across the bridge to the Valor's edge. Back into the fragile safety of their own ship. The moment the cube was secured in the cargo bay, the voices fell silent. The wreck behind them drifted once more in silence, as if nothing had ever stirred. But the crew knew better. They had heard the impossible. They had seen the enemy's corpses speak with the voices of human dead in the command chamber. Rains removed his helmet. Sweat clung to his brow, though the air was cold. He looked at the cube resting behind layers of containment and shielding. Even now it pulsed faintly like a heartbeat waiting for the next breath. Lieutenant Hale spoke quietly. "Sir, what is it?" Rains did not answer right away. He thought of the war. He thought of the countless fallen, both human and Cathari. And he thought of the whispers calling his name from the mouth. Of a corpse, at last he spoke low and grim. "It is not a weapon," he said, "it is a memory." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. A memory that could reach across species and even across death. A memory that could bend the voices of the fallen too. Speak through the enemy. It was a thing that should not exist, and yet it did. Rains turned his gaze back to the viewport, where the ruined Cathari ship spun slowly in the dark. He whispered to himself, but all could hear. "The enemy remembers," and with those words he knew the past war was not over. It had only been waiting, and now it was waking again. The cube pulsed in its containment field deep inside the Valor's edge. It did not move yet. Every crew member felt it breathing with them as if it listened to their hearts. Commander Rains ordered double guards posted outside the chamber. No one touched it without his voice of command. 3 days passed with the ship drifting near the wreck, while the science team scanned and probed the strange artifact. It gave off no heat, no radiation, and yet it produced a low hum that vibrated through the deck plates. When anyone stood near it too long, they heard whispers that were not their own thoughts. Snatches of words, half-remembered cries. And sometimes names, always human names. Lieutenant Hale could barely sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he dreamed of battlefields he had never stood on. He saw soldiers falling, men and women in armor, faces twisted in pain and courage. He woke with tears on his face, though he had never met the people in his visions. Rains kept his distance, but his thoughts returned again and again to the words spoken by the corpses in the wreck. "The enemy remembers." He felt those words were a warning, though. He did not know from whom or for what. On the fourth day, the Valor's Edge received a message from Fleet Command. Strange energy spikes had been detected on a ruined colony world 2 sectors away. The readings matched the cube. Command ordered the defenders to investigate immediately. The colony had been abandoned after the war with the Cathari. It was a graveyard world scarred by bombardment. Rains remembered the battle fought there 20 years earlier. Tens of thousands had died in a storm of fire and steel. No one had returned since. The journey took only hours. When the ship dropped into orbit, the crew stared at the surface. Cities lay in ruins, mountains split open by orbital strikes. The ground was ash and dust. Yet deep beneath one, shattered continent sensors picked up energy signatures, an underground facility still alive, despite the destruction above. Rains led the team down in a shuttle. The landing bay was collapsed rubble, but the old service tunnels remained. The humans moved through the darkness, with weapons ready. Every sound echoed down stone corridors, and every shadow seemed to shift when the lights passed over it. At last they reached a sealed blast door, marked with the faded emblem of the human fleet from the war. The door groaned, but opened when Rains placed his hand on the scanner. Inside, they found a vast archive chamber. Rows of ancient consoles lined the walls. Glass cylinders rose from floor to ceiling, filled with frozen mist. Some still glowed, faintly after decades. The moment they entered, the lights flared awake. Holograms burst to life in the air. Figures of soldiers, both human and Cathari, appeared flickering blue and white. They stood frozen in poses of death wounds, still visible across their bodies. The chamber filled with hundreds of them, like a silent army trapped between moments. Then one of the figures moved. A human soldier stepped forward. Her armor bore the marks of a unit that had perished on this very world. Her face was pale, her eyes empty. When she spoke, the voice echoed through every speaker in the archive. "We remember what is not ours." The Cathari figures stirred. Their jaws opened, and in broken human speech they repeated the same phrase, "We remember what is not ours." The defenders raised their weapons, but Rains ordered them to hold fire. This was no attack, this was a message. The voices rose together, louder and louder, until the air trembled. Sergeant Vega clenched his rifle. "Sir, this is wrong. The dead should not speak." Rains stepped closer to the nearest hologram. The soldier's eyes locked on him, though there was no life behind them. He asked the only question he could. "What do you remember?" The hologram flickered and scenes erupted across the chamber walls. Images of battles long past, human marines charging across shattered fields, Cathari soldiers roaring in defiance, the two sides locked in endless war. Yet the memories did not belong only to humans. The Cathari holograms spoke too, and their words were human memories spoken through alien mouths. "I saw Earth." One said, "I held the hand of a child," said another. "I fought at Titan Ridge," cried a third. Every story was human. Every memory carried pain and fire that no Cathari should have known. The chamber became a storm of voices, each shouting fragments of lives once lived. It was overwhelming and terrifying. Rains shouted for silence. The holograms froze. At once, only one figure remained moving, a tall Cathari warrior, scarred and broken. He stepped forward, his hologram flickering but his voice steady. The weapon failed. He said, "It was meant to erase you from us, but instead it made us carry you inside." Rains felt the weight of the words settle on his shoulders. So that was the truth. During the war, the Cathari had tried to destroy more than human lives. They had tried to destroy human memory itself. They had built a weapon to erase history, culture, and even names. But the weapon had turned on them. Instead of wiping humanity from existence, it had burned humanity into the minds of the enemy. Now every fallen Cathari carried human ghosts within them. The hologram warrior raised his head. "You are not gone. You never will be. Even in death, we remember you." The chamber flickered again, and then the lights shut down. The holograms vanished, leaving only silence and the faint hum of machines. The defenders stood shaken. Sergeant Vega finally spoke. "Sir, if this is true, then every Cathari soldier is a grave for our dead." No one answered. The thought was too heavy. Every enemy who fell in battle carried a human within. The war had never truly ended. It had only been buried. In memory, Rains gave the order to gather all data from the archive. The science team worked quickly, pulling files from consoles still alive. Records showed how the Cathari had tested the weapon. Reports described human prisoners forced into chambers. While machines tore at their minds, many died in agony. Others survived only to lose their memories forever. Yet the experiment had collapsed when the weapon turned its power back on the Cathari soldiers themselves. The attempt to erase had become a curse of remembrance. One final message was found, buried deep in the archive core. It was a recording from a human scientist left behind during the last days of the colony. Her voice was faint but clear. "If you find this, then you must understand. We built a countermeasure. We could not allow humanity to be forgotten, so we twisted their weapon back against them. Every Cathari who touches our minds will carry us inside. They will never escape us. We will live in them forever." The message ended. The chamber fell silent once again. The defenders returned to the shuttle with data cores in hand. Above them, the sky of the ruined colony stretched grey and endless. Below them, the archive waited, still alive with its ghosts, on the way back to orbit. Lieutenant Hale broke the silence. "Sir, if they all carry us inside, then what happens when they realize it?" Rains did not answer at once. He stared out the shuttle window at the broken world beneath his mind, turned to the cube aboard the Valor's edge and the voices it had carried. He thought of the corpses in the wreck that had spoken his name, and he thought of the enemy fleets still alive out there somewhere in the dark. At last he spoke low and grim. "Then the war will not stay buried. It will rise again because memory does not sleep." When they reached the ship, the crew placed the archive data beside the cube in containment. The two pulsed together, as if recognizing one another. For a brief moment, the hum of voices filled the bay again. Faint whispers carried across the air. Names, cries, orders shouted long ago. The cube and the data seemed alive together. Rains knew this was only the beginning. The past was not finished with them. The enemy remembers, and now humanity had proof as the Valor's edge turned from the ruined colony and slipped back into the dark. The commander stood alone at the viewport. The stars stretched endless before him, but all he could hear were the voices of the fallen whispering through time. Ship Valor's edge moved through deep space, with engines burning steady. The crew worked, but their eyes kept turning to the containment bay, where the cube pulsed and the archive data glowed beside it. The two objects seemed to breathe together, like a pair of hearts beating in the dark. No one liked walking past that chamber. Even the guards posted outside admitted hearing whispers when the corridor grew too quiet. Commander Rains spent hours reviewing the files they had taken from the archive. Every page carried weight. The Cathari weapon had been designed to wipe away human memory and identity. It had failed. Instead, the enemy carried human ghosts in their minds. The scientist's final words echoed in his head again and again. "We will live in them forever." During the third night cycle aboard ship, something happened that changed everything. Sergeant Vega was on watch when he heard a faint scratching inside his helmet. At first he thought it was interference from the comms, but the sound grew clearer. A voice, a man's voice speaking his name, Vega. The sergeant froze. His eyes swept the empty corridor. Only the hum of the ship filled the air. Yet the voice came again, stronger now, more desperate. "Vega, it's me. You left me behind." The blood drained from Vega's face. He recognized the voice, Corporal Lyle. A soldier who had died 20 years earlier on Titan Ridge, Lyle had been Vega's closest friend in the unit. He had watched him fall and had never forgiven himself for surviving. Now the dead man's voice filled his helmet. "I died and you ran, but I am not gone. I am here inside them." Vega stumbled back against the wall. He tore off his helmet, gasping for breath, but the voice did not fade. It echoed. Inside his head, without speakers, without comms, it was real. Other crew heard shouting and rushed to him. They found Vega on the deck, clutching his head. When they tried to help, he lashed out, screaming the dead man's name. They restrained him and carried him to the med bay. But even sedated, he whispered through clenched teeth, "He speaks to me. He speaks through them." Word spread quickly. Some called it madness. Others feared it was proof of what the archive had shown. The fallen were finding voices through the enemy and now through the living rains. Ordered the science team to investigate. They ran scans on Vega's brain and found patterns of activity unlike anything human. The waves matched fragments stored in the cube and the archive. No data. Somehow the memories of the dead had crossed into him. Lieutenant Hale confronted Rains after the tests. "Sir, this is not a coincidence. The weapon is still working. It is spreading through us now." Rains did not argue. He had seen the truth in Vega's eyes when he spoke with a dead man's voice. 2 days later, the crew intercepted a distress call, a Cathari ship drifting near a barren star system. It was small and heavily damaged, but still alive. Command gave strict orders to avoid contact. But Rains made the choice to board it. He wanted answers. The dead could not speak only through wrecks and cubes forever. They had to know what was happening to the living enemy. Now the boarding team entered the crippled Cathari vessel with weapons raised. The stench of burned metal and charred bodies filled the corridors, yet they found survivors. Half a dozen Cathari warriors sat huddled in the central chamber. Their armor broke in their faces, hollow. When the humans entered, they did not fight. They lifted their heads slowly and spoke in voices that chilled the blood rains. They said together, "We know you. We know all of you." One of the Cathari dragged himself forward. His jaw trembled as he spoke in broken English. "I am Corporal Lyle." Sergeant Vega nearly collapsed when he heard it. The alien's throat-shaped words that did not belong in its mouth. It repeated them again with more strength. "I am Lyle. I fought beside you. I died and you left me. But I am still here." Vega stepped forward, tears burning his eyes. His rifle shook in his hands. "Lyle is human. You cannot be him." The alien placed a clawed hand on its chest. "I carry him. I carry his memories. I see what he saw. I feel what he felt." The enemy remembers. The words rang through the chamber. Every surviving Cathari repeated them in unison. The sound filled the humans with dread, deeper than any weapon fire. These were not just prisoners. They were vessels of human dead. Rains gave the order to bring one of the survivors aboard the Valor's Edge for study. The others begged to come too. They begged in human voices, calling names of soldiers lost long ago. But only one was taken, while the rest remained behind to die in silence. The captive was placed under guard in the medbay. Doctors ran tests, but results made little sense. The Cathari brain showed 2 distinct patterns of memory. One alien and one human. 2 lives woven together in one skull. When asked to speak, the creature shifted between tongues with ease. One moment its native growl, the next the soft voice of a human woman long dead. The crew gathered to hear, and in that moment fear gripped every heart, because the fallen spoke again through the enemy, the Cathari. Prisoner lifted its head, and in a steady human voice said, "I am Lieutenant Marin Holt of the Earth Fleet. I died on the colony of Ressor, but I remain." Rains stepped forward. "Marin Holt was real. I served with her." The prisoner nodded slowly. I remember you, Commander. I remember the day you gave the order to hold the line. I remember dying when the sky burned. I have lived in them ever since." The medbay fell silent. No one could speak. Here was proof, undeniable. The weapon had not just cursed the enemy with human ghosts. It had tied the souls of the fallen into their very minds. Later that night, Rains sat alone in his quarters, staring at the stars beyond the viewport. The whispers had begun to reach him too. Faint at first, but growing clearer each hour. Voices of the fallen calling from the dark corners of his mind. Names of men and women he had buried in memory, now alive again. He poured a glass of water, his hand shaking. He whispered back to the voices, though no one else could hear, "What do you want from me?" The answer came soft and cold inside his skull. "We want to be remembered. We want to be free." Rains closed his eyes. He knew the truth now. The past war was not buried. It lived on in every enemy mind. And now it had begun to speak. Through the living, humanity was remembered. But the cost of that remembrance was only beginning to unfold. The next morning, alarms rang across the Valor's edge. Sensors detected movement at the edge of the system. Cathari ships were approaching, not one or two, a fleet. The crew rushed to battle stations, but the enemy ships did not open fire. They stopped at the system's edge and broadcast a single message on every channel. The voice was broken yet clear. "It was human, we remember." The defenders stared at their consoles in disbelief. The enemy ships spoke with voices of the fallen. The war was no longer a fight of guns and steel. It was becoming a war of memory and ghosts. Rains stood on the bridge, listening to the broadcast. The same phrase repeated again and again. "We remember, we remember, we remember." He whispered the only answer he could give. For the fallen. The fleet of Cathari ships hung silent at the edge of the system. Their weapons were armed, but they did not fire. Instead, they repeated the same message over and over in broken human voices. "We remember." The sound carried across every channel and filled the Valor's edge bridge like a storm. Some crew pressed hands to their ears, though the noise came through speakers, not the air. Others whispered prayers under their breath. No one had ever faced an enemy fleet that spoke with the voices of their own dead commander. Rains stood firm at the command chair. He listened to the haunting chorus until the silence inside him felt heavier than the noise itself. At last, he gave the order. "Break orbit. Set course for the moon in the Thalos sector." The archive data mentioned another site there. "If we want answers, that is where we will find them." The Valor's edge turned from the enemy fleet and jumped to faster than light speed. The voices of the fallen faded behind them, yet they echoed in the minds of every crew member. No one could escape them now. The journey was tense. Crew members reported hearing whispers in their sleep. Some claimed to see shadowy figures of human soldiers reflected in the corridors. The cube in containment pulsed brighter with each passing hour, as if guiding them forward. Even the captured Cathari prisoner spoke less in its own tongue and more in human voices, as if the memories inside it were winning. Control. At last the moon appeared before them, grey and barren, its surface scarred by deep craters. Scans showed a faint energy signature beneath one of the largest impact scars. Buried beneath layers of rock and ash lay a hidden facility. Human design, not Cathari Rains, led the defenders down in shuttles. The landing zone was quiet. No life signs, no movement, only the wind, sweeping across lifeless stone. They cut their way through a collapsed shaft and descended deep into the moon. The tunnels were old but intact. Their walls bore the marks of human tools, not alien claws. After hours of searching, the team reached a massive chamber sealed by blast doors. The emblem of the Earth fleet was burned into the metal. The same emblem they had seen in the archive. Rains placed his hand on the scanner again. The doors groaned open, a rush of stale air escaped, and inside, they found what the archive had promised. Rows of machines stood like silent giants, cables twisted across the floor like roots. At the center of the chamber rose a tall spire of black metal, covered in strange markings that glowed faintly blue. The spire pulsed with the same rhythm as the cube. Aboard the Valor's edge, Lieutenant Hale stared wide-eyed. "Sir, this is it. This is the weapon." The chamber vibrated with low hums as if the spire felt their presence. Screens flickered to life on. Nearby consoles, old logs written by human scientists appeared. Rains ordered them translated and read aloud. The logs told the story clearly. The Cathari had created a weapon to erase humanity, but human scientists had seized a fragment of it and twisted it back. They had reshaped it into a countermeasure, a lattice of neural memory, designed to burn human identity into any mind that touched it. If humanity fell, then the enemy would never forget them. They would carry human voices forever. It was not just revenge, it was survival through memory. The final log chilled every heart. We could not win the war with weapons of fire, so we built a weapon of memory. If they destroy us, our ghosts will live in them. They will remember us even. When we are gone, this is our victory and our curse, the log ended. Silence fell heavy in the chamber sergeant. Vega shook his head slowly. "Sir, this thing poisoned them with us. That is why their dead speak our names. That is why I heard Lyle's voice." Rains did not answer. His eyes were fixed on the spire. The pulsing glow seemed to match the beat of his own heart. He stepped closer and placed his gloved hand against the cold metal at. Once the chamber exploded with light, the spire activated, and the defenders were thrown to the floor by the force of its energy. Voices filled the air, not from speakers, not from machines, but from the walls themselves, a chorus of thousands crying out at once, "We are here, we are not gone. We are the fallen." The voices grew clearer and formed names, names of soldiers the defenders had known, names of men and women who had died in battles across the galaxy. The crew clutched their heads, but could not shut out the sound. Tears ran down faces hardened by war. As they heard voices of lost friends speaking again through the weapon, then one voice rose above the rest. Calm and steady, a woman's voice. Rains froze when he recognized it. Commander Rains. The voice said, "Do you remember me?" It was Lieutenant Marin Holt, the same officer who had spoken through the Cathari prisoner. Her voice now came through the weapon itself. Rains whispered back, "Yes, Marin, I remember." The spire pulsed brighter, and the air filled with her words. "We are trapped in them. We are bound to the enemy. We cannot move on. Free us, or all will fall." The chamber trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. The machines roared with power. The defenders scrambled to their feet, weapons ready, though no enemy stood. Before them, Lieutenant Hale shouted over the storm, "Sir, we cannot hold this. The spire is awakening fully. If it links to the fleet outside, they will all carry it." Rains faced a choice heavier than any battle he had fought. Destroy the weapon, and risk humanity being forgotten, or let it live, and curse the galaxy with endless memory of the fallen. Before he could answer, the spire unleashed a blast of energy. A wave spread across the moon and out into space. Sensors aboard the Valors. Edge went wild, every system buzzed with static, every crew member heard voices screaming in their minds. In that instant, every Cathari ship in the sector echoed the same cry. The enemy fleet did not fire weapons. Instead, they broadcast a single message, louder than ever before. For the fallen, the sound shook every channel, every console, every heart. The spire dimmed again, its power spent for the moment. The chamber lay in ruin, but the weapon still stood, its glow faint yet steady. Rains breathed, heavy sweat on his brow. He knew now that the weapon could not be ignored. It was alive, and it had only begun to spread its influence. Sergeant Vega whispered hoarsely, "Sir, what do we do with it?" Rains looked at the spire one last time before giving the order, "Secure what we can. We will not destroy it yet. We must understand it first." The team returned to the Valor's Edge, with data pulled from the consoles and fragments of the spire's design. The moon shook behind them as if angry at being disturbed, but the weapon remained waiting on the bridge. Rains faced his crew. "The truth is clear. We carry a weapon not of fire, but of memory. It was made to ensure humanity would never be erased, but now it binds us to the enemy forever. We must decide whether to end it or to use it." No one spoke. The decision was too great for words. Outside the viewport, the stars burned silent, but in the minds of every defender, the voices of the fallen still whispered. The Valor's Edge carried the data taken from the spire, and the air aboard the ship felt heavier than before. Every corridor seemed to hum with voices that were not there. Crew whispered to one another that the ship itself had begun to breathe like a living thing. Commander Rains stood on the bridge, staring at the stars, while the engineers studied the fragments of the weapon. Reports came in every hour, yet none offered comfort. The spire was not just a machine. It was alive in a way no one could explain. It carried the memory of thousands, perhaps millions, and it pulsed with hunger, as if it wanted more. Lieutenant Hale leaned across his console with pale face. "Sir, the fleet that shadowed us has not left the system. They are waiting," Rains asked, in a low voice. "Waiting for what?" The answer came sooner than anyone expected. The Cathari fleet broke silence and moved toward the ruined colony where the spire slept. But instead of opening fire, the ships formed a circle around the planet. They broadcast not threats, but songs. The sound shook every human who heard it. It was not Cathari language. It was human music. Old war hymns sung in broken rhythm, lullabies sung to children long ago. The enemy fleet sang in voices that did not belong to them. The crew of the Valor's Edge gathered at viewports to listen. Some cried openly, some crossed themselves. Others stood frozen, unable to believe what they were hearing. The Cathari sang with the voices of the fallen sergeant. Vega whispered, "They are praying." The fleet remained in orbit, chanting for hours without moving weapons or breaking formation. The haunting sound drifted through space. Like a funeral for both species, Rains called the senior officers into the command chamber. On the table lay the cube and fragments of the spire, sealed in containment. Their glow flickered in rhythm, with the enemy songs as if joining the prayer. "This is no longer war," Rains said. "They do not fight us. They worship what they carry. Inside them, they are kneeling to our dead." The words hung heavy in the chamber. No one wanted to speak, yet all knew he was right. The enemy was not an enemy now. They were mourners, carrying a burden too heavy to bear. The science team reported more. Disturbing news. The Cathari prisoner aboard the Valor's Edge no longer spoke in its own tongue. Its voice had become entirely human. It sat in its cell, whispering prayers in English prayers for soldiers who had died long ago. It called their names and begged forgiveness for sins it never committed. Dr. Ilara, the ship's medic, reported the prisoner refused food or water. It seemed content to sit in silence with eyes closed. When asked who it was, it answered differently each time. Sometimes it called itself Corporal Lyle, other times Lieutenant Holt, other times names no one on the ship recognized, but all confirmed from old records of the fallen. The crew began to avoid the medbay entirely. They called the prisoner a ghost wearing alien. Flesh one night cycle alarms blared through the ship. Sensors showed movement on the surface of the ruined colony. Cathari troops had landed. But instead of forming battle lines, they marched silently toward the spire. The defenders watched through cameras as the aliens laid down their weapons and knelt in a wide circle around the black tower. Their heads bowed, their voices lifted in prayer, the sound carried even through vacuum. Somehow, the The spire translated it into human words and broadcast. Across comms, the defenders heard their own names, voices begging forgiveness, voices crying out for peace. Lieutenant Hale muttered under his breath, "This is not a battle, this is a church." Rains knew they could not let the spire grow stronger. Yet he also knew firing on kneeling enemies would stain every soul aboard the ship. They were soldiers, not executioners. He gave the order to hold fire. For hours, the Cathari remained on their knees. Their voices joined with the spire until the entire moon trembled with sound. The cube aboard the Valor's edge pulsed brighter than ever before. The voices of the fallen filled every corridor. Crew clutched their heads in pain, yet also felt strange comfort, as if the dead stood beside them once. More then, something new happened. One of the young crewmen, Private Solis, collapsed on the bridge. He shook violently, then stilled. When he rose, his eyes glowed faint blue like the spire's markings. When he spoke, his voice was not his own. "I am Captain Ren Arden of the fleet. I fell at Titan Ridge, but I walk again." The bridge froze. Rains stepped forward, his heart pounding. Ren Arden had been his commander decades ago. He had died giving the order to hold the line when all seemed lost. Now, his voice spoke from the throat of a boy, barely 20 years old. The crew tried to restrain Solis, but he pushed them aside with strength beyond his size. He moved with the bearing of a soldier long dead. He saluted Rains with perfect form and repeated his words, "I gave my life for Earth and now I return. Through them we rise, through them we endure." The glow in his eyes faded and Solis collapsed once more. Medics rushed him away, but scans showed nothing, no trace of what had possessed him. Only exhaustion and fear. Whispers spread quickly through the crew. The weapon did not only bind the dead to the enemy, it was beginning to use the living as vessels too. Rains gathered the officers again. He looked each in the eye before speaking. "This weapon has crossed every boundary. It holds our dead. It fills the enemy with our ghosts. Now it reaches into us. We must decide, do we destroy it or accept it?" The chamber filled with silence. Every officer felt the weight of the choice. Destroying. The spire might break the link and free the dead, but it might also erase them forever, leaving only silence. Keeping it alive meant carrying the curse into every mind across the stars. Before they could decide, sensors screamed again. The enemy fleet moved, but still they did not fire. Instead, they broadcast a final message, a plea spoken in hundreds of human voices together. "Give us the weapon. Give us the memory. Let us carry them always. We will honor your dead." The words chilled the blood of every defender. The enemy no longer asked for victory. They begged for chains. They wanted the curse because they believed it made them holy sergeant. Vega slammed his fist on the table. "Sir, we cannot give it to them. We cannot let them carry our dead like trophies." But Hale shook his head. "Maybe this is the only way to survive. Maybe being remembered is all that matters. If we destroy it, humanity may fade. If we let them carry us, humanity lives forever." Rains closed his eyes. The voices of the fallen filled his mind, louder than ever. They called his name. They begged for freedom. They begged for remembrance. Two desires pulling against each other. He opened his eyes and whispered, "The enemy prays to us, but I do not know if we are gods or ghosts." The fleet outside waited in silence. The spire pulsed brighter with every second, and the voices of the fallen grew so loud that the walls of the Valor's edge shook with their cries. The choice was no longer far away. The defenders would have to decide soon, and whichever path they chose would shape not only the war, but the future of every memory humanity carried. The Valor's edge drifted in orbit above the ruined moon, while the enemy fleet circled below. Neither side fired a shot. The war was quiet now, yet more dangerous than before. Every man and woman aboard the ship felt the weight of the silence pressing against them. Inside the brig, the Cathari prisoner sat unmoving. Its body looked thin, almost broken, yet its eyes glowed with faint blue light. Dr. Ilara studied it through the reinforced glass. She kept her voice calm, though her hands trembled. "Commander, it is changing again." Rains joined her. The prisoner lifted its head and spoke in English. But the voice that came out was not alien. It was the voice of a human child. "Please help me. I am lost," Ilara whispered to Rains. "That is not the alien speaking. That is someone inside it." Rains stepped closer to the glass. "Who are you? The prisoner blinked slowly. Its mouth moved, but the words shook as if caught between two worlds. "My name is Arden Solis. I was a soldier in the Earth Fleet. I died at Titan Ridge. But I am still here." The words froze the air in the brig. Every officer remembered Titan Ridge. It had been one of the darkest battles of the war. Tens of thousands had fallen there, including Captain Ren Arden. Now a voice claiming that name spoke from an alien throat. Ilara ran scans quickly. The prisoner's body showed Cathari biology, but its neural patterns shifted between human and alien every few seconds. It was as if two minds lived inside, one shell. Rains spoke low. "This is no prisoner anymore. This is something else. A survivor caught between both sides." The prisoner pressed its hands against the glass. Its eyes glowed brighter now, and its voice deepened into another tone. This time, it was not a child. It was strong and commanding. "I am not alone. We are many inside this frame. We are the last survivors. We are the memory made flesh." The lights across the brig flickered. The cube in containment pulsed with violent rhythm. For a moment, every crew member heard voices whispering their own names. The fallen were closer than ever. Rains gave the order to move the prisoner under heavy guard to the science deck. But when the guards opened the door, the prisoner did not resist. It walked calmly, as if it had already chosen its path on the science deck. Lieutenant Hale worked to connect fragments of the spire with the cube. The prisoner sat in the center of the chamber watching with glowing eyes. Hale frowned as streams of code and data filled his screen. "Commander, the fragments are not separate pieces. They are nodes of a living network. Every piece is linked across distance. That is how the voices spread." The prisoner spoke again in a steady human voice. "They are not nodes. They are graves. Every piece is a tomb where the fallen rest." The room fell silent. No one wanted to believe. The alien shell spoke truth, yet deep inside, they all knew it was possible. Ilara leaned forward. "Are you saying each fragment holds a soul?" The prisoner nodded slowly. "Yes, not soul memory, but memory so deep it feels alive. You gave it to us. When you fell, now it binds us all." Rains felt his chest tighten. This was the weapon in its true form. Not fire, not steel, but memory, turned into a living chain that bound friend and foe alike. Later that night, cycle alarms screamed again. Sensors on the moon's surface showed movement. Inside the ruins, a signal pulsed from deep underground. Different from the spire, Hale's eyes widened as he traced the data. "Commander, there is another facility hidden beneath the old tunnels. It is still active." Rains ordered a new landing. "Team, immediately the defenders descended once more through broken stone and ash. The tunnels twisted deeper than before. At last, they reached a chamber sealed by thick doors covered in markings, unlike anything they had seen. The markings were both human and Cathari, two languages carved together, not enemies, but blended as if written by a single hand sergeant. Vega muttered under his breath, "This place is wrong. This place is both of us." The doors opened with a groan. Inside the chamber they found something none of them expected. A figure lay in a pod filled with pale light. Its body was human, yet its skin bore faint Cathari lines. Its chest rose and fell slowly. It was alive. Ilara rushed forward with scanners. "Commander, This is not pure human, not pure Cathari, either. It is both. The figure's eyes opened. Blue light shone within them. When it spoke, the voice echoed with many tones at once. I am the last survivor of Titan Ridge. I am what the weapon made when memory and flesh became one. I am both human and Cathari. I am the proof that the fallen do not rest. The defenders froze. This was not a prisoner, not a ghost. This was life twisted by the weapon into something new. The hybrid sat up slowly. Its gaze moved from soldier to soldier. I remember the fire, I remember the screams, I remember every name that died, and I carry them all inside me. Rains felt the air grow cold. This was the truth of the weapon. Not just memory carried in machines, but memory reshaping life itself. The hybrid extended its hand toward Rains. You must decide, will you destroy us and let silence take our names? Or will you let us live and bind all species with memory? The chamber shook as if the spire itself listened to the words. The voices of the fallen rose again inside every mind. Some begged for release, others demanded remembrance. The defenders staggered under the weight of thousands of cries. Rains steadied himself and gave the order to bring the hybrid back to the Valor's edge. It did not resist. It walked calmly like the prisoner before it, but its presence filled every corridor with unease. The crew stepped aside, whispering that a ghost now walked among them. On the bridge, the debate began again. Hale argued that the hybrid was proof of survival beyond death. If humanity could live on in new forms, then they had won a victory greater than any battle. But Vega shouted that it was a curse. No soldier should be forced to live on inside the body of an enemy. It was worse than death. The crew split in fear and anger. Some wanted to destroy the hybrid at once. Others wanted to protect it and learn from it. Rains listened, but gave no decision. The hybrid stood silent at the center of the bridge, watching them. All at last it spoke in calm voice. You cannot run from what you are. You are memory, you are voice. Even if you kill me, the weapon will rise again. It is already inside you. Every dream you have proves it. The crew fell silent, for they all knew it was true. Each of them had dreamed of the fallen every night since touching the spire. The weapon was not only outside, it was already within, outside the viewport. The enemy fleet still circled. They did not fire, they did not leave. They only waited and prayed. And now, with the hybrid aboard the Valor's edge, the question grew sharper than ever. Was this creature salvation or damnation? Was it the last survivor of humanity's fall, or the first creation of something new? The voices of the fallen whispered in every ear. The choice was near, and there was no turning back. The hybrid stood in silence on the bridge of the Valor's edge. Its eyes glowed blue, and its face carried no fear. The crew kept their distance, but no one could look away. From it, every soldier felt the weight of its gaze, like a chain pulling at their thoughts. Commander Rains stood tall, though the voices of the fallen pressed against his mind like waves against stone. He gave the order for shields raised and weapons. Ready for outside the viewport, the Cathari fleet shifted into battle lines. This time they were not kneeling in prayer. They were preparing for war. Lieutenant Hale's voice shook as he read the reports. Sir, every enemy ship has activated weapons, but their signals are strange. They are transmitting human codes, old battle orders from our side. The crew stared in disbelief. The enemy was not only speaking in human voices now, they were fighting with human commands. Sergeant Vega slammed his fist on the console. They are not just praying anymore, they are trying to become us. The hybrid finally spoke, its calm voice carrying through the tense air. They are not your enemy anymore. They are you. They carry you inside them. The war is already over. Rains turned sharply. No, the war is not over until I see peace with my own eyes. The ship shuddered as the first wave of Cathari fire struck the shields. The fleet outside had begun its assault. Yet even as weapons flared, Their comms carried human voices. They shouted battle cries from Earth's history. They called out orders of generals long dead. It was as if the ghosts of humanity were fighting on both sides at once. The Valor's Edge fired back, lasers ripped through the void, and missiles tore across the stars. Enemy shields shattered, but no ship broke formation. Instead, they pushed forward, chanting louder in voices of the fallen. Inside the minds of every defender, memories surged without control. Private. Solis screamed as he clutched his head. He shouted names of soldiers none of them knew. Images of battles no one had fought filled his vision. It was as if the dead were using him as a doorway again. Dr. Ilara worked to hold him down, but more crew collapsed. One by one they shook with the same visions. The war outside was now a war inside every living mind. Rains steadied himself against the storm. He barked orders to keep firing, but his voice cracked under the weight of screams echoing in. His skull. He heard Maren Holt again. He heard Captain Ren Arden. He heard his own brother, who had died years ago at Titan Ridge. They all cried his name, as if pulling him into the past. The hybrid walked forward, untouched by the chaos. Its eyes burned, brighter than before. It raised its hands and spoke in a voice that carried both human sorrow and alien strength. This is the memory war. It cannot be fought with steel or fire. It is fought with names. It is fought with the will to remember or to forget. The ship shook harder as enemy fire grew heavier. Sergeant Vega shouted through the storm, "Commander, we cannot last long. Our shields are breaking." But Hale called out over him, "Sir, if the weapon is truly a network, then the hybrid can connect us to it. We might be able to strike them through memory, not just guns." Rains stared at the hybrid. Its face was calm. Its body glowed with the same rhythm as the spire fragments. He realized Hale was right. This being was the bridge between both sides. It could open the path into the heart of the network, but to do so would mean opening their own minds fully to the weapon. It could mean death, or worse. It could mean losing themselves forever. Rains gave the order, "Do it." The hybrid stepped into the center of the bridge. Cables from the science deck were brought and linked to its body. When the final connection locked, the ship's lights dimmed. Every screen filled with streams of code mixed with human letters and Cathari symbols. The hybrid's voice thundered across the ship. "Hold on to who you are. Hold your names, for we are entering the war of memory." The crew screamed as light burst across the bridge. For a heartbeat, they no longer saw metal walls or consoles. They stood instead on battlefields long past Titan Ridge, the ruins of Mars, the burning skies of Europa. Every war humanity had fought flashed before their eyes. They were inside the memory itself. Enemy soldiers stood across from them, but they too were made of memory. Their faces shifted from alien to human and back again. Sometimes they carried claws, sometimes rifles, sometimes nothing but empty eyes. The defenders fought with everything inside them, not with guns, but with memory itself. They shouted the names of their dead. They remembered faces of family. They clung to who they were, while the enemy tried to strip it away. Private. Solis raised his hands and cried the name of his mother, who had died in the first invasion. The memory burst like fire and struck down a figure of shifting flesh before him. Others followed, each memory of love, each memory of sacrifice, each memory of pain turned into weapon against the storm. But the enemy fought just as fiercely. They threw back human memories, twisted into agony, visions of failure, visions of betrayal, visions of children dying in ruined cities. Every dark thought the defenders had ever buried rose against them. Sergeant Vega fell to his knees, clutching his chest. He saw his squad dying, again and again before his eyes. He heard their screams until he believed he had killed them himself. Only Rains pulling him back with his voice kept him from breaking completely. The battle raged not in space, but in the mind. Ships outside burned. Yet neither side withdrew, for the true war was being fought inside every soldier's heart. At the center of the storm stood the hybrid. Its body shone with searing light. It spread its arms wide and cried out in both human and Cathari tones, "Enough! This war cannot end with death. This war can only end with choice." The battlefield of memory froze. Both sides halted as if chained by the power of its words. The hybrid turned to Rains. "You must choose now. Do you release the fallen and let silence take their place, or do you bind both species together forever in memory? One choice gives peace, but forgets. The other gives remembrance, but chains all minds." The voices of the fallen screamed louder than ever. Some begged for freedom, some begged for remembrance. Every soldier shook under the weight of the cries. Rains stood at the center of the chaos, his chest heaving. He knew there was no perfect path, only a choice between two. "Oh, curses!" But before he could answer, a blast ripped through the Valor's edge. The ship shook violently as enemy fire tore across the hull. The vision of the memory battlefield shattered. The crew fell back into the real world, gasping for breath. Alarms screamed across the bridge. The shields were gone. The enemy was preparing for the final strike. The hybrid fell to its knees, weak from the strain. It looked up at Rains with glowing eyes and whispered, "Decide before all is lost." Outside the viewport, the enemy fleet gathered fire. Inside the ship, the fallen still cried out in every ear. The memory war was not over. It was about to reach its breaking point. The bridge of the Valor's Edge shook under the weight of enemy fire. Consoles sparked. The air filled with smoke. Crew scrambled to keep systems alive. But everyone knew the ship could not last much longer. Outside the viewport, the Cathari fleet formed in tight lines. Weapons glowed with burning light. One more volley and the Valor's Edge would be torn apart. Inside the ship, the hybrid knelt on the floor, its body glowing faint blue. Its voice echoed weak but steady. "The choice is yours, Commander. Release them or bind them forever. There is no other path." The fallen still cried in every ear. Some begged to be freed, some begged to be remembered. The noise tore through minds like blades. Sergeant Vega grabbed Rains by the arm. "Sir, we cannot hold this if we wait any longer. We are all dead." Rains's heart pounded. He saw his crew worn and bleeding. He saw the hybrid staring with eyes full of sorrow. He heard Marenholt's voice clear above all others. "Do not forget us, Rains. Do not let us fade into silence." Then another voice came, one he had not heard in years. His brother's voice. "Let us go. We did our part. You must live free." The weight of the decision crushed him. One path would curse every living being with endless voices. The other would erase the fallen forever. No victory, only sacrifice. "Lieutenant," Hale shouted over the storm of alarms. "Commander, if we overload the spire fragments with the cube's energy, we can end it. The network will collapse. The voices will go silent," Ilara cut in, her voice breaking. "But if we do that, they will be gone forever. Every memory bound inside will vanish. No one will remember them again." The hybrid staggered to its feet. It spread its arms, glowing brighter than before. "If you end it now, you kill me too. I am their vessel. I am their last breath. But if you let me live, they will live in all of us. Even your enemy will carry them." The ship shuddered under another strike. Panels burst into flames. Crew fought to contain fires as smoke thickened. There was no time left. Rains gripped the command chair with white knuckles. He closed his eyes for a moment and whispered, "For the fallen." He opened his eyes and gave the final order, "Overload the fragments." Now Hale's fingers flew across the console. The cube pulsed violently. The fragments screamed with light. The hybrid cried out in pain as its body shook under the surge. The voices of the fallen rose higher than ever before. The ship seemed to split with sound. Every soldier dropped to their knees, clutching their heads. Names filled the air in a storm of memory. Thousands of names shouted together one last time. The hybrid fell to the floor, its body breaking apart in streams of light. It looked at Rains with fading eyes and whispered a single word. Remember, then it was gone. The cube shattered into dust. The spire fragments cracked and fell silent. The storm of voices ended all at once. For the first time in years there was silence. The crew gasped for air, their minds empty where the fallen had once cried. The silence felt heavier than the noise. It felt like a tomb. Outside the viewport, the enemy fleet staggered. Their ships drifted without order. Weapons dimmed. Signals collapsed. The Cathari fell silent too. Their prayers ended. Their voices gone. They broke formation and scattered across the stars like frightened animals. Without the voices binding them, they were nothing more than a broken fleet. The Valor's edge floated in ruins, but alive. The crew stared at the empty screens. No more human songs, no more ghostly names. The fallen were gone. Days passed as the defenders limped back to friendly space. Repairs were slow, and the silence never lifted. No one spoke of the voices anymore, yet all felt the hollow inside. They had saved themselves, but at a cost too. Heavy for words. Sergeant Vega sat alone in the mess, staring at untouched food. Ilara walked past the brig and paused before the empty cell where the prisoner once sat. She pressed her hand to the glass and closed her eyes. Hale worked on broken consoles, but his hands moved without purpose. Rains walked the corridors each night, unable to sleep. Everywhere he went, he expected to hear the voices again, but only silence answered. At last the ship reached Earth space. The fleet welcomed them as heroes. But none aboard the Valor's Edge felt like heroes. They had ended the weapon, but also erased the last echo of those who had given everything. Rains stood before the council to deliver his report. He told them the truth. The weapon was destroyed. The voices silenced. The enemy scattered. But humanity would never hear the names of the fallen again. The council praised his choice. They said peace had returned, but Rains saw no peace in the eyes of his crew. Only loss on the final night aboard. The Valor's Edge, before decommissioned Rains, walked to the viewport alone. He looked out at the stars where the Cathari had fled. His reflection stared back at him. For a long time, he stood in silence. Then faintly, he heard something. Not from comms, not from machines, from inside his own chest. A single voice, soft as wind. Marin Holt, I said. Do not forget us. Rains closed his eyes. Tears ran down his face. He whispered back into the silence. I will not. For the fallen, the stars burned on, silent, endless. But inside one man's heart, the memory still lived, and as long as one remembered, the fallen were never truly gone.